1 2 1 2, check check. All good. Yes.
Okay. Right, good morning, ladies. And there's no gentleman here except Prof. Panos. Aren't you lucky? It's just a sign that the academic innovation happening in our faculties. Oh, I'm touching now on gender issues here. But we do have another gentleman, our technological support here, and we're very grateful for you being here. So, ladies, welcome to our online portfolio session here. Prof. Panos has been here now for this week. He has presented the team-based learning workshop these past 2 days. It was quite a larger group. We thought we would be a bit smaller, but you will be working hard today. Yes, good. So I'm going to give over to him so that he can introduce himself to those of you who haven't met him yet. And then we can give each one a chance just to say who you are, what your subject field is, and yeah, you can ask them whatever you want to ask them. Thank you. Oh, sorry,
We need to do.
just with this thing, because it's being recorded and it's being wordt uitgesaai. Broadcasted, sorry. It's end of the week. My English is finished. If you have to say something, please use this because it needs to be on the recordings also.
Good morning. I'm very happy to see you all today for the presentation around e-portfolios and program level assessment. Just a bit of background for people that they did here today. My name is Panos Vlachopoulos. I'm the Associate Dean Quality and Standards for the Faculty of Humanities at Macquarie University, Sydney, Australia. But I spend a significant amount of my time at Macquarie with the Faculty of Medicine and Health Science as the Associate Dean Learning and Teaching and the Associate Dean Quality and Standards. And I was responsible for developing a framework for program level assessment in all our health-related disciplines, and then into the negotiation about deciding what portfolios, how going to embed them, and so on. So although I come from a humanities background, I have a number of years of experience with the health profession. I was also at the University of Malta for the Bachelor of Health Science, also working with them on e-portfolios. So I do have around 10, 12 years of experience of seeing the e-portfolio kind of movement moving around, positively and negatively. And today, the main purpose is to share with you some of the key lessons learned that we have encountered over the number of years, but most importantly, to know from you what are the particular questions and things you want to know. We're a relatively small group, also a group online, that you can be free to type your questions. Let's make it more of a conversation. It's around 3 hours, the session, with a break. I have a lot of slides, but most of them are visuals, so it's examples, which is good, not a lot of theory. But we need also to position it in a kind of theoretical. Now, by training, I'm a philosopher, so I studied philosophy, and then I moved into higher education for my master's and my PhD. So how we learn, how do we engage people, what is the type of interactions that people do face-to-face and in particular online, is what I've been researching over now 15 years in higher education. That's a bit for me. By the way, I'm not Australian. My accent is not Australian, as you can know. I'm Greek, 100%, was born, raised, and studied there, my first degree. So my accent is a bit different. If you have any questions, just ask me. Yeah, that will be fine. Same for the online ones. You have the microphone here. So for the microphone now, I think we need to have it on, and I need to switch this off so the people here. If quickly you can go your name, your area, and once we do that, I would like you, everybody has a little sticky note in front of them. Very quickly, one question, even the most simple or the most difficult question that you have at this stage before we start about portfolios, e-portfolios. So we can put them there and see as we go whether we get some responses. Okay? So we go. Thank you.
I'm Sandra van Dijk from the School of Pharmacy. I was trained as a medicinal chemist, but now as director, I need to oversee the whole program. And a large component of the program is our work-based learning. And assessing that gets us into trouble sometimes.
Yep, I can see exactly that. Your departure point.
I am Cornelie from Nutrition. I'm going to keep it simple, just Cornelie. And Vanessa Olivier from CTL suggested that I use portfolios to evaluate my students in research modules that I'm presenting at the university. And I don't know a lot about portfolios, so I'm really here to learn. I've never used them. In our department, we had someone using them, and they felt it's a lot of work to assess them. So I want to be able to maybe implement it, but then not burden myself with too much extra work doing the assessment.
I'm Theodora Modise from Nutrition as well. The modules that we teach in the professional programs, usually one concept builds on the other. So to maintain that string, I felt, portfolios would actually be useful. However, how do you align it to your learning outcomes, and also how do you assess it and give feedback to the students as well?
Yes. Okay. So actually, I think you also give me questions. So actually, I'd like to start like a few topics, so we know what we're doing. So we have one about the portfolios as a tool and what they are and what they can do. Okay. That's the one. The portfolio solution. Then we have something around the assessment and feedback. Yes. Thank you.
I'm Ina at the School of Pharmacy. I'm with the fourth year students, and we do management. And with the fourth year, we need, with Blooms, to do more creative. And so I made use of portfolios and give them assignments to create, to compile. And it was a lot of paperwork. So I want to know if an e-portfolio will work and how it will reduce the burden as well.
The physical aspect. And I think also, for example, you mentioned the work-based assessment as a key point. So work-based assessment. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Janae from the School of Psychosocial Health. So I'm still an intern. I'm very new to the whole teaching area, so this is basically just to inform and introduce me to using portfolios and how they can be used.
And we also mentioned about research, assessing research skills in the portfolio for that as well.
I am Anya from School of Physiology. Our fourth year students do work integrated learning. So they go into the workplace to do some experience, and we would like to assess them on that. So I'm considering using e-portfolios for that. Yeah.
I'm Fragarda from Health Professions Education. I'm starting a mentorship program for lecturers, not really new lecturers, but 2 third-year teaching experience, and I would like to use e-portfolios as the evidence. It's going to run over a year, so effective use of those portfolios.
Good morning, I am Mariette Fourie. I am from the Center of Teaching and Learning. It is a great privilege to be here at Health Sciences and also to spend the day with you. I am the coordinator of the professional development opportunities at the university, so this is one of the areas that has been identified on which we must continue your work after you have left. So I would really like to know how to validly or valuably continue training on this, as I'm also the faculty lead for theology, and I requested specifically portfolio as assessment tool. I must arrange a workshop for that. Yes, so I'm really, as part of our portfolios, assessment is one area that we must give advice on. So I'm also here to learn from each other and from you. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Renee Marie Keert from Centre for Teaching and Learning. I think it is essential that as a academic advisor, that we should also know, what are best practices. So in informing lecturers, when we do a curriculum revision or module or program revision, to know and to give advice that is purposeful, that is aligned to what we see. So everything should be purposeful. So for me, it's very important to hear and see what this particular assessment tool can do.
Thank you. I think we can keep the microphone. Of them. Okay, you can still write any of them if you want to phrase them, but all of these things actually we will cover them, but depending on how the conversation goes, if you want more technical information, we can do that and we can show tools that they work, and I have two that I've been working with, but it's good also to address the big elephant in the room, which is assessment, workload, and actually the big question is it worth it? I mean, this is what everybody keeps asking at the end. It is, and I have to start by saying that portfolios is a particular way of thinking around assessment that to set it up initially takes a bit of time. So we have to be absolutely clear that we have this time to do it rightly, and then you save time over time. That's how it works. But I'm going to give you an example. So, in Australia, particularly in the bigger universities, one of the biggest movements over the last 4 or 5 years has been around employability. So how can we create students that once they graduate from whatever profession they are, they will be ready to go out, get a job, particularly in their own discipline, and as they do, they also have acquired a number of skills that they go beyond their relevant discipline. So all this idea about transferable skills and how a student from pharmacy or a student from nursing or a student from education, they also have acquired certain behaviors, traits, attitudes that they will make them better employed. That's kind of the big thing. And that is where a lot of the discussions around portfolios is taking place. To that end, most of the universities, they invest a lot of time in work-integrated learning. So we have centers for work-integrated learning. We have capstone units, like last year, 4th year or 3rd year units, that they try to bring some sort of a real-life experience in the university. And some universities also, they will have partnerships with companies and industries to do the additional thing. The professions, the more professional or vocational programs, for example, our engineering, our law, our health, our physio, they will have this as part of the curriculum anyway. So portfolios, when they kind of initiated, they were coming from that kind of aspect, how they can become something that can be used to bring evidence of all these extra additional skills, and they are very, very important, but they are not evident most of the times in our everyday curriculum, in the Cognate. Yeah, nothing new. My understanding is very similar here. There's a lot of tendencies for work-integrated learning. I was told that you're also developing a tool for work-integrated learning. It's one of these things, and whether any portfolio could be plugged in. So from the high leadership, I get the feeling that this is happening as we speak. So what we need to be ready as academics and professionals, we need to engage in this discourse. Because, and I know we've been recorded, but the biggest problem we have with portfolios is normally our external vendors, companies, that they have very particular reasons for selling our product to us at a cost that sometimes it's questionable, yeah? And we need to know that if we're going to use it, we are going to actually put it in good use. The worst examples I've seen of e-portfolios is where universities, they spend little money. By little money might be 100,000 Australian dollars, $1 million of your currency, to do a pilot. And over 3 or 4 years, you keep spending this amount of money, but has no integration across the sector. And then 5 years later, you are still trying to figure out what is an e-portfolio and so on. So I think the problem is that the people, they need to understand what they can do, what are the limitations. Then when people engage you in a conversation, you are very confident to say, so Sandra will go and say, I know exactly what I want to do with that. These are my parameters. Can you provide me with this tool? As opposed to just be open to run endless pilots. So that's kind of a starting background from my experience over the years. Now, just a few things around skills, and I think it might be the same data here. This is data that came from 2018, like last year, from Australia, and it is around the demand and supply and the gaps in different students' skills across the sector. You will see here that communication, self-management, digital problem solving, and critical thinking, that came from Deloitte Access Economics, a global company that runs reports on statistics. It's skills for business success, yeah? And it is from a company which is a university company, Deakin University is in Melbourne. They set up their own private entity for skills development, credentials, and to some extent portfolios. So they actually asked for this research to take place. So it's fascinating to see that all of the skills that we think that there is gap, 45%, they tell us this 45% gap in skills of students when they graduate in communication. Yet we all know that communication is engraved in what we do. You know, so something is wrong. Either our students are not really able to convince people and showcase and evidence and talk about communication in the way that an employer, or we don't teach them communication in a way that real life expects it. So communication in a presentation in a class, as opposed to be able in a work placement to communicate to a different audience, is it something that we do or is something that we don't do? And can a portfolio-based approach to assessment bridge that gap? So I picked this here because I strongly believe that if we do a portfolio, let's call it pedagogy for the sake of argument, but a portfolio assessment is going to be at the end of the day, we should be able to start bridging that gap. That's another slide from the World Economic Forum, again in 2018. It's freely available online. It's called The Future of Jobs 2018. You can download it if you want and read the full report. And what they've done is they try to project between 2018 and 2022 which types of skills they will start become more automated and which types of skills they will still remain more important from the human point of view. It's a fascinating slide for me, primarily because if you come now to Australia and you look for the most trendy and sellable degrees, it will be all about information and data. Yeah? So everybody will try to sell you a degree on information processing, doing different things, which is good in a way. But 60% of these degrees are about students getting data, trying to deal it and sort it out and so on. This is the skill that at the click of a button in the next 4 to 5 years will be sorted automatically. The thing that we are still going to be needing is reasoning and decision making, which is an important thing. Coordinating, managing, and advising. You know, it's nothing surprising. We are human beings. You know? Advising, communicating, interacting, and then you go to more other things around performing technical activities, all the way down to this. So the 3 top things are things that the students, they should be able to showcase that they can do it. They should be confident to talk about the skills, but all the evidence we have is that they don't. If you ask a student, can you reason? Can you provide evidence? Can you do these things? They don't know what to do. Although they do it in writing, they do it in the different assessments, but it does not register with them that this is a skill that they can talk about. Any comments on that? Anything surprising? Would you say that this is typical here as well? For that. Now, I got access for just 1 week to a massive database called Burning Glass. This database has all the job advertisements, every single job advertisement in every sector in Australia and New Zealand and other countries, but I only got it for that. And I ran a report to see what are the top skills that graduates that they just finished university, so 0 to 2 years experience, they need to have in order to be able to even be considered for an interview. Yeah? Again, consistent methods. Communication skills, 47,000 types of jobs, they had it articulated like that. Then it was interesting that from a technical point of view, Excel. Yeah, and this is a database that came all the way to problem solving, effective relationships, written communication, mentoring, leadership, analytical skills, decision making. The list keeps going. And a lot of the really nitty-gritty technical skills, they are very much on the bottom. Yeah, again, a very important skill for us to understand where the demand is. So, is there anything we can do in order to provide students with both an opportunity to practice, showcase, be confident and competent about talking and presenting these things within the curriculum? So, the big departure here is that most of us, we talk about learning outcomes. Yeah, everybody writes a learning outcome, 2 learning outcomes, 3, some of them 8, 10, 12, how many you have. You do your mapping, you do your assessments. Typical assessments, they will be what? Examinations, yeah. Could dare to say it might be over 50% or 60% of the assessments, there will be exams. Depending on the disciplines, obviously in more clinical education, you'll have more work-based or work-in-the-based or skills-based assessments. But even them, the OSCEs, the DOPS, all these things that we might be able to do. Psychologists, they will have the technical writing, reporting, the analysis, I can imagine in you. So we do a lot of tasks and activities that they have these assessments as part, but they are not explicitly assessed as a skill. Yeah, they are part of the content, is also part of the context in the way you speak. Yeah, Jordan? I'll be the...
Thank you. In pharmacy, in the module, our communication module, we assess the students by using simulated patients. So we pay actors to do the, and it, I think it's working very well for us.
I think like programs like simulated patients to do. And the students, they do practice communication. They do practice a number of skills. Now let's try to move away from learning outcomes to a bigger picture thing. So I want to try to position the e-portfolio in what can be called programmatic assessment, program level assessment, and then embedded in this philosophy is the concept of capabilities and competencies. So if you come from a profession that has approved accreditation, and most of the health and most of the engineers and most of the lawyers and school teachers and educators, they will have national frameworks. They talk about either capability or competence. Yet in the university, apart from the high-level graduate attributes, that they will be, you know, being a professional or being a problem solver, then we position it more in the learning outcomes. So I'm gonna just quickly explain the 3 things from the way that at least we are using it in our university. So programmatic assessment actually is a methodology. It's a methodology, established methodology from the University of Maastricht in the Netherlands, and talks about finding a way in a university where students routinely, they collect information about the things that they do, assessments, but also other things, participation and everything. And we have a way to collect, analyze, and complement it with additional information. So, growth, constant growth. Think of it almost like in your course, you have your modules. In your modules, you have your assessments. The university might have extracurricular things happening, join a particular club or a society. In your life, you might be working, you might be volunteering, you might be actually studying something totally different from another university. I don't know how things are. You might be doing fully online courses just to develop yourselves. This framework says that university life and university assessment is only part of what the student does. Being a dad, if it is more mature students, or being a good friend, also provides opportunities for students to reflect and develop skills, put them in practice. Yeah. So if we assume that this is a framework, we are talking about finding a way that students, they compile all the evidence of the things that they do towards a targeted competency or capability that you or the discipline defines, and having this as an accessible and potentially a showcase piece of work. And this is where e-portfolios are important. And then with this programmatic assessment, normally we play with these two words. I'm pretty sure you're familiar, competency and capability. The difference, of course, is that capability is a progressive term. Capability is an implied ability, an ability yet to be developed. And that's very useful for us because we can play with capabilities from year one, day one, not only when the students are ready. But the work-integrated learning that normally takes place in years 3 or 4, depending on the practicums, this is where you go there and you try to prove your abilities, so to say whether actually you are competent. So to my eyes, a student can have a number of capability opportunities to grow that you seed across the curriculum, but at the end of the day, you're going to be giving them some sort of assessment, mark for being competent, less competent, and you can like that. Any questions?
Thank you, Prof. So in this process of actually then testing, assessing, so there should be a scaffolded process, because I feel sometimes what becomes evident that one of the learning outcomes should be effective communication, and I think health is, according to all the support that they get, I think they are way before other. I cannot just say that bluntly, but I think it's very valuable to have experts and people that focus on teaching and learning whilst having a profession, like you said. So sometimes we don't scaffold this learning process. Sometimes the learning outcome will say the graduates must be effective communicators, and like they are doing, I think it's excellent. But then there's no proof that was actually scaffolded until they must be tested. I think that is, I think that is a big missing link.
Yes. That's what I connected to. You're absolutely right. I mean, scaffolding or guidelines or whatever you're going to call it, is something that we need to find to put in the curriculum. That's where actually why if there is a approach is providing this kind of scaffolding. However, universities, depending on the way that they operate sometimes, if they do have mentorship schemes, if they do have tutors as part, if they do have career advisors available, they might create this type of committees, as we call them, advising committees for the portfolios, and they take that. But the reality is that in most of the universities, if we're going to be doing e-portfolios for the majority of them, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, and in your case, I'm talking about how many thousands, yeah? We need to find a way to put part of the scaffolding in the everyday curriculum, yeah? And that becomes the thing. If I'm teaching Introduction to Anatomy, where I spend 80% of the time doing very technical skills, still, I do a bit of communication, but my focus is on the content and the skills development. Do I have a space, or can I play a bit with my assessments to accommodate any of these capabilities or competencies? From my experience, most of the academics, they won't buy in that process because very few they want to give part of their curriculum to the bigger curriculum. Some of them, they will say, this is not our job. Our job is to give them the foundational, the academic and the cognitive foundation to be able to think, whatever you take think to be. Most of them, they mean to be able to recall information later on. But that's where they are. And then they will go out and they will find their ways. You know, that's why we have all this extracurricular. Everything is extra or add-on. This is where the portfolio can fail immediately, because a student sees exactly from the same way. If it is not valued from my academics, it is not valued in my year 1 and year 2. Now you try to force to me in year 3 or 4, where I'm going out for a practicum, I'm going to technically tick a box of a few things. They don't buy into the idea of professional development in their careers. So the two examples I'm going to give you today are examples where we rooted the e-portfolio from day 1 of the welcome day of the university, which comes at a particular way of doing things and a particular cost as well. And we're going to have a discussion about it. But you're absolutely right. So, talking about the principles, the big thing about the programmatic, it's this deliberate arrangements of longitudinal assessment activities. It's another thing which is very, very important. In the medical program, normally we talk about low-stake and high-stake assessments. Low-stake assessments, you will be willing to practice and fail in a safe environment and receive the feedback. The high-stake assessments are the progression assessments, the ones that you fail, you're not coming from the preclinical to the clinical stage, or you're not moving from one particular area of expertise to the other. The same, to some extent, happens in education that you need to do. Now, the longitudinal assessment means that you don't necessarily need to assess the same skill again and again and again, but you develop that skill at different levels. A very quick example with communication will be, if we are going to be using simulated patients in our curriculum, and we want to use them in year 1, more likely we want to do what we call kind of an enhancement process, where the students, they will be observing them, they will be taking some notes and will be reflecting. Now, if you want to advance this communication skill later on, you keep doing that. You bring in different scenarios with different complications. Then in the second year, the students, they might be asked to simulate themselves a particular scenario. That is an enhancement of that. And then in the third year, they might actually practice it in front of another audience and they can receive feedback. Now, that is kind of a longitudinal assessment of the same skill, but you say to the students, I'm not necessarily give you a fail mark. There's going to be a particular milestone where you should be at a particular level, and that could be in a year period, not necessarily based on units or modules. So you might be practicing communication across 4 different modules. Is there any way to say, well, don't really assess them to their micro ability of them standing in front of an audience and presenting, but assess them with this and all the other 3, and ask them to put this as a big piece of proof that I am a good communicator. Because otherwise we keep wasting a lot of energy and time correcting either the lower level skill, or to some extent putting them directly into the high end without having the scaffold. So longitudinal assessment activity is something that is a prerequisite for a portfolio, I would say, but needs a programmatic thinking, needs someone to sit with their team across all the academics, open up all their assessments on the table, and see how they can group them in a way that they are meaningful. The second is the progress to inform their own teaching. Yeah? So you need to be prepared, depending on how students are progressing, to customize or tailor part of the activities and the things that you do in order to meet the student needs. If your students are failing towards communication, or they're failing towards even a technical skill, I would just say, well, sorry, you failed. I assess you, you failed, I don't care, next group, come over. Or it's a responsibility for us to say, wait a minute, 20% of my students failed. I don't have in my curriculum time or opportunities to do it. Where are these opportunities that I can ask students who are failing to go and bridge the gap between the skill that they should be? And then we talk about extracurricular, and we talk about other opportunities, work, and so on. And the other, of course, is the expectation, which is difficult but doable on the part of the students, to develop an appetite for their own assessment, like to be able to know where they stand. So someone gets feedback that says, your skills around communication are adequate, however, you still need to work harder in order to have an ability to convince and convey a message to a non-technical audience. That has to be something. Normally, a student will read that feedback, they will close the thing, and they will put it aside. This process says you need to have in your portfolio curriculum an expectation of action planning. Students, they should be able to receive the feedback or the information and play back to you how they are improving towards the milestones. Questions or pause here?
I wanted to say before we came to this slide that the part of the scaffolded process should include low-stake assessments. And there must be evidence that these things were assessed. Why? Because this point of feedback. Because if they don't know what they did wrong and why they did it wrong, they are not going to be able to put like remedial actions in place. And I think that's very effective if you have a portfolio, because it is just so rich in instruction, so that you can actually, when they fail and you give them feedback, you also put like a guided action plan. You cannot just tell them, go and fix it. You must actually, as an expert, see what were the problems, and then specifically, that's where differentiated learning, I think, comes in, where you have to actually then specify, this is your guided action plan, and then you must have evidence of that. It's like a remedial plan. I think, yeah, it is a lot of time that is going into this, but I think if you can, start that based practice, I think there must be evidence of those, yes.
Again. By the way, online, remote people, you can chat some questions. Maybe this audience today will have some questions. We had them for 2 days, they didn't answer any question or they didn't ask. We kind of felt a bit distant, but that's all right. But I take your point exactly about the idea of the students being able to bring the evidence. If we achieve that, that's the tricky thing and the most important thing of the students, being able to assess for themselves what is a good evidence for the development, and then you amend, if you want, the type of assessments, and I will come to that, and the way you give feedback to help them with how they can get evidence. One of the easiest ways will be that you use in your feedback the terminology and the skills that you would like to see being promoted in a way, Yeah, it's quite common in that. I mean, this again comes from this programmatic assessment theory. The second bullet point is important: meaningful feedback to further attainment of professional capabilities, and then of course the reflection. I mean, we all talk about reflection. What is it? How do we do it? Can we just ask someone to go and reflect? I have seen millions, potentially will be millions of examples of portfolios around, but some of them, they say, reflect on today's key messages, which is a good starting point. But normally the students, when they ask them, then they just write a description. Okay? The message from today's message was that I sat and I learned something about this, full stop. The scaffold of reflection is an important thing. Now, that's the way, and then I'm going to give you the example so you can see it in practice. That's the way in the School of Medicine and Health Science. That was in 2015. We launched the first for Australia accelerated degree. That was a 2 years degree in clinical science. The idea were that so it was more around the clinical skills It was not medical science, it was clinical science. And the idea is that the students, that they graduate from that course, then they could continue with a MD, or with a doctor of physiotherapy, or with public health, and if we had nursing or other areas, they could actually go to the next degree. So almost like a key professional oriented to some extent, although they did have a lot of physics and anatomy and biomoleculars and all of these things, but the emphasis was a lot on professional development. It was in that degree that we start thinking, how can we move away from having just a course level outcomes to having a capability framework. So the very first thing we did was to engage our dean of the school, it was myself, a couple of clinicians, external people that they came, and of course we had the capabilities from the Australian Medical Council that they already published, and we were working for a couple of months to develop a capability framework. That's what we came up with. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We had to define our university had graduate attributes, and the graduate attributes, there were 3, I think, or 4. Being a critical person, being a professional, it was very high level. For something like a portfolio to work, you have to make it discipline as much as you can specific, because it will be a totally different set of expectation for the experience that they get in a pharmacy degree or a nursing degree or education or philosophy. So we thought, okay, what are the important things? We developed a set of high-level capabilities. So scientist and scholar, the ones which is on the left, on the vertical, scientist and scholar, engaged citizen, and professional. These were the 3 high-level things that to some extent agreed with the university's attributes. So we're not off from the university. Then within the scientist and scholar, we needed to provide students with examples of what we expect a science to be able to do across the course and what a scholar. Then in the engaged citizens, we gave our own interpretation. For example, system focused, it was very unique to the discipline of health, but it was also something that we thought it could be developed much later in the year, not in years 1 and 2. So you will see we only had some expectations in year 3. Effective use of technology, though, was an expectation. So the medical council will say, clinicians, health people, I will say the physiotherapy council will say the same, but the only thing I'm going to say is that they need to be effective users of technology. What does it mean? We had to qualify this for the opportunities that exist in our university. So I went down and say, at the very basic, in year 1, if you can actually engage with the tools for learning, your e-portfolio, your online systems, and you can prove active engagement with the tools, is good enough that actually you are engaged with the agenda of the digital. In the second year, which is the other milestones, we want to see you using more medically or health-oriented technologies and resources. And by year 3, you should be able not only to use them, but to understand in context, to explain risks, the ethical dimensions, and so on. At this stage, we didn't even care what we teach. Yeah? This became agnostic of the content. Then we need to map what we teach to that and identify the gaps. And the gaps were huge. Yeah? Yes. But it's important that if you do have a document like that, you are not starting from what you have. You start with what you should, what the standard should be in that case. Then if I go to the aspect of the professional on the back, behaves with integrity and compassion. That was actually given directly like that from the medical council. Now, what is evidence of behaving with integrity and compassion for a year 1 student in the very first few months? What could logically someone expect from someone? Well, at minimum, don't plagiarize. don't violate some of the policy. Don't break the university law as a starting. If you can prove that actually you are a good student, you are on time, you do your things, you behave with integrity in your class, when you do group work, you are not the one not participating in all these things, is a good starting point. So all the level 1 are actually setting up them to be good students in what area you have to do. And then by year 2, they need to continue. If you read on the top, expectations for year 2, continually you meet year 1, you don't leave the year 1, you keep doing it, but then we need you also to be able to identify students' interactions. This is, for example, where our simulated patients will come. We will instruct our simulated patients. Normally they will have ethical and community issues, but they will observe them with this particular focus. And then by year 3, they should be able also to understand and analyze the legal aspects of health. They need to know more about what is an integrity and compassion in the professional sector. Somewhere, we hope that that will be taught, because if not, then we had a big gap in the curriculum. And similarly, if you go down to collaborator and team player, going to collaboration, contributes constructively to group work. You cannot, you can imagine how much effort takes for students to really, really be team players. Yeah, they like to be part of a team, but they want to be individuals in the team. Very few of them, they will be proactive in a team, trying to drive it and so on. So constructive group work, it's something that we had there on purpose to see, can you do it? So peer assessment, which is something that we do or we don't do, found its place as a core assessment item in our, it's a driving force to say pretty much, can we have more peer assessment across the university? Because we'll be able to have this as evidence. And then all the way to communicates effectively face-to-face, or identifies types of groups and teams, discussion groups, and then all the way about strategies to reflect and resolve conflicts in year 3, when you do mostly interprofessional work. So we had simulated experiences, students from different areas, from physio, from medicine, from health, from biomedical. They might go together and try to solve one issue. How do you communicate? How do you do it? So it's not difficult to write, but you really need to agree with your colleagues that these are the, how many they're going to be, around 25 pieces of evidence that we want to see across a 2 years development. And then the next thing is, do you stage it, the scaffolding? Most of the frameworks that you'll see, they will only have the expectations at graduation. They expect the high level. What we propose here is that you set the expectations in the student journey, not necessarily in a year approach. Where do you believe that there is a significant progression change for your degree? And most of the times in the clinical sector, it will be between preclinical and post-clinical, or it will be between them doing the theoretical aspect and then doing the practicum if they go halfway. So before they go to do their work integrated learning, at what are the evidence they need to have, and then what else they need to add during the practicum. So that will be after completion of your practicum. Any questions on that? I'll ask us in a bit to do a bit of writing, a couple of the skills that you believe, but let me show you how that plays out in a course. So that's a course, Bachelor of Clinical Science. In year 1, I told you it's a 2-year accelerated, and the acceleration is because they have what we call the 0 areas, which are 6 weeks, half a semester. But they are 25 hours per unit every week. So July and January, the students, they sleep and they eat in the university. It's full on. They just study. Oops, what happened here? Went a bit faster in that. And they do it. So let me pause this a bit, if I can. In year 1, they do human biology, they do anatomical science, they do physics and physics for life science, and then why this is playing. Sorry, guys. I'll try to. Go back to my animations, transitions, apply to all. Slideshow. Okay, I'm back to that. We embedded a professional development practice unit. Now, in that case, because of the nature of the acceleration, the unit is a year-long unit, module in your case. It's a year-long module that carries a particular number of credits. And the main thing of that unit is to train the students on reflection, communication, the skills, and host their portfolio. A different model that we've done is a similar thing, but not as a module, but as an add-on extracurricular thing, which they must do. It's a pass-fail, but has 0 credit. So actually it does not take part of the curriculum structure, but it's something they have to do, and they need to attend the seminars and the tutorials. Most of the universities, they will opt for the second, primarily because they don't want, although I think it's wrong to my view, they don't want to lose content, important content from the curriculum. Like what we had to take out something, for example, from neuroscience or something advanced in order to accommodate this unit, because it is the equivalent of 3 modules in a degree, and the degree has a standard structure. But my advice is, if you have space and you can sacrifice to some extent some of the content, it's better off to, it's more honest to the students and to you because of workload, to have an embedded stream on whatever is going to be professional learning, whatever you're going to be calling your e-portfolio solution. So our students, they were studying all of these things, and in parallel, they were running with this professional development thing. Okay, so these are the main capabilities. Let me see here. Do we have any evidence? Believe me, there's plenty, especially if you go to medical teacher or any of these professional education journals, and you put about portfolios, programmatic assessments, there's a lot of papers that they will come. We've done an extended literature review. The main constant message is, it's good to do it, but evidence of the portfolio, what do students select to document? The biggest problem is the students, they are not trained in reflection, and secondly, in the ability to evidence and showcase skills. We almost assume that this is something that students, they will be able to do as a matter of practice. They cannot do it, and becomes a ticket box exercise, and normally in the final year, and they graduate. So there's a lot of negative press out, if you want, from a point of view of the academics, that all of these things work well, but they need training, and the answer is yes. So for 10 years now, you tell us you need training, we better start doing it, because otherwise, let's forget the whole of the area that we're talking today, if we cannot really develop it. It's the same way when you ask students to get training, to write references. How many times do you ask them to, how many times you assess them on referencing? I can imagine at least 40 or 50 times across the degree. Even before they graduate, they still get marks whether they did the APA or the Chicago or whatever you're going to do. And you ask why. Is that the most important skill when they graduate, they're going to reference in that way ever again in their life? No. So that's my argument to them. In the same way that APA or whatever referencing, I would say is the same thing to tell me that they can describe how people living in Australia access technology, and I want evidence of that skill in that space. So that's pretty much, if I was to separate the milestones that we have here, 1, 2, 3 milestones, that's the milestones here. So the milestone, although it's a 2-year, and we call them a 3-year, but it's almost a year and the second intensive semester, so a semester and the other small semester, another semester and the intensive. And then the graduation completes with a placement, the health placement, the work integrated. So that's the final thing that they take their portfolio in order to fill particular gaps. Following? Okay, so far? Anyone online has any questions? They're all right? Yes, they seem to be all right. Okay, that's good. But if they have questions, they do. How difficult would be something like that for you? Embed a process like that across, and why? Why that would be difficult? I'm just pausing for a sec.
We have really an overloaded curriculum at this moment in our health sciences. We are actually, most of our programs have got more credits than what the Council for Higher Education prescribes. So we always have to motivate why we have more credits. So trying to take something out and put something new in is basically impossible. Well, never say impossible, but it will take, it will take a lot of lobbying. Because originally we started thinking of bringing in a module or a unit that focuses on work integrated learning, interprofessional learning, service learning, all combined, and this will be a perfect thing to do that. But it's just impossible to get a separate unit for that in our curriculums.
Pharmacy has a very structured way of designing a curriculum. Pharmacy's council publishes competency standards, and then from there on we develop the curriculum, but with exit level outcomes. And at the moment, the Council for Higher Education is developing standards for programs. They've already developed social work, law, engineering, and we're in the process now for developing one for pharmacy. But if I can get back to the communication again, I never realized that we actually had the progression. We're just not documenting it. In our one of our first year modules, the students need to evaluate the Patch Adams video. And then in the second year, they have the actual communication module where they get assessed through their interaction with the simulated patients. They also do some videos where they showcase poor communication and good communication. And then in the third year, they go out to the clinics and they have to interview a patient whose home language is not Afrikaans. And then in the fourth year, we have the large module for work-based learning, and then they work in the hospitals and clinics where they have to communicate at the level of a pharmacist.
Yes. Most of you will have evidence of the majority of these capabilities. All one-level capabilities actually are self-directed. Students, they should be able just to meet them by being good students. That's the magic there. And you tell them, if actually you are a good student, you follow, you can manage your time and so on. And then in skills like communication, teamwork and so on, most of us, we do have a progression, an enhancement. We call, at our university, we call it the 3E, enhance, extend, empower. Medicine, add, and fourth E, and trust, which is the level where you trust them to do it on their own, which is good, like totally independent confidence. And they do it exactly like that. However, the students, if you ask them, do you have, how would you rate your communication skill, and give me an example? They will say, they will go directly and they confuse with presentation. They're going to say, yeah, I can present, instead of saying, well, I've been actually trained for 2 years Using a high-level simulated patient, I've been observing it, then I simulate it, and then I demonstrate my skills with people that the first language is not Afrikaan or English or something like that. And I say, oh, great. Then, from the point of view of us, is where is the evidence? Okay, and that's for us internally to assess and give feedback. But from the employer's point of view, that's exactly what they want. When they go to an interview, or they go to put a portfolio or an application for a postgrad or a doctor of medicine degree or anything, they need to write a personal statement why you are a good communicator. That's where we can help them in that case. Going a bit back to how difficult it is, I'm really honest, it is very difficult. Now I'm responsible of implementing a similar process for a humanities degree, the Bachelor of Arts, the most diverse thing on planet Earth. Yeah, 60 different disciplines, from philosophy to history to languages to just name it. Global health, we have millions, in a totally open space with around 8,000 students, with not space, not even one unit being able to be devoted here. So we now opt for the second model, which is an add-on scaffold approach, which is a hurdle assessment. You have to showcase it, but it's going to be finally assessed in your graduation portfolio. And I'm going to show you the example from that point of view. So we were playing a bit with the model. So what is the thing that we ask the students to do in relation to this framework? And we had a number of ideas. Is it about studying, reviewing, reflecting, how we're going to present it to a student so easily they will understand and have almost like a cycle in their mind that this is something we need to be doing. We ended up with contribute, collect, reflect, and action. 4 verbs that we thought are good, but the main thing we were debating is whether contribute is part of this, or we go with the collect. So where does the portfolio start? Is it a collection, or it is do you make the opportunities for the portfolio happen yourself? And we landed with contribution. Contribution here says participation in a number of things. So you as a student, you need primarily to contribute to this by engaging as much as you can with the opportunities, creating extra opportunities for you when we don't provide you, because you have to take equal responsibility for that framework. And then from that place, we provide you then the tool or the mechanism to collect, reflect, and action. And of course, then there's the showcase, if you want to have a showcase at the very end. And that's how we did it. Is it a free portfolio or an online paid portfolio? We did an extensive, maybe 4 or 5 months. We went to different vendors. We asked different prices, different requests, and we decided that we are going to go with a portfolio. Actually, it is a product that exists, is already designed. We are not going to design it internally, primarily because we didn't want this additional hurdle of having to work with IT internally to put something in place, and it would take ages. We used one tool here, this tool called PebblePad. It's a tool, comes at a cost. Normally it's an institutional cost, and the universities that they believe that they want to invest in portfolios, they will negotiate with them, and they will take a price, and so on and so forth. There's other tools we are thinking at the moment. That was one piece of thinking. The other piece of thinking was, shall we just let students develop their own portfolio using any tool that they would like to use in their life to showcase and keep it for life? So anything from an online blog, a space, and so on. The limitation comes to progressions, comes to the evidence. You cannot really have evidence that comes from a hospital or from a school. It could be a photograph, it could be a recording from an interview exposed within the student's possibility into the space. So for that reason, we decided that we cannot really ask them to bring your own portfolio, because that will make our life difficult. Plus, aggregating all this information in one central point that then we can do the assessment in a logical way without having to go to each portfolio independently and clicking to links, it's going to make it impossible. Yeah. So we opted for a professional portfolio. Having said that, nowadays, are you partners with any of the big guys, Microsoft? You use tools across, or Google, the Gmail? I mean, the other way that we can think about it is using the Google Sites and Google Docs and all the Google platforms collectively. There is a way that you can set up a Google site, which is going to be the portfolio for your course. You pre-populate it using Google Forms or anything, what you want to use, and then students, they just go into the Google site and they work and they plan and do. It's safer, still is not a portfolio tool in a way that it will allow you to do a sophisticated assessment of it. But it's the next, for us, was the next best solution. If the university was not supporting a commercial like Sakai, like it's a vendor, yeah? The next one was to say, you already pay money for Google, in our case it's both Google and Microsoft, can we create a portfolio concept around the free tools? And normally a learning and teaching center or the Center for Health Professions, you could work together to say, well, these are the ingredients of a good portfolio. But personally, if the university is serious about work integrated learning, the cost for a portfolio is not so big compared with all the other costs for IT that they spend. So it's worthwhile going for it. Any questions so far about this? So that's actually a screenshot from a portfolio that we developed, and that's the Pebble Pad. And let's see a bit what we've done with assessed. So that's a map of all the assessments in the different units of study across the Bachelor of Clinical Science. So in human biology, our students, normally they will do essay, reference list, online quiz, writing task, final exam. In biomoleculars, CBMS, they will do workshop, a molecular project, mid-semester test, a final exam. In the anatomical science, 6 quizzes, 2 practical tests, a final exam. In physics, they will do tutorial, lab, mid-exam, final exam. So you can see exam is very important here. In professional practice, where it's ours, they do video analysis, group project, something, and of course, a portfolio assessment of milestone 1. Cardiorespiratory, they do weekly exams, activities, and labs, and then all of these things. What was the tricky thing was to map this to that document. And that's something that I advise you do. You download your assessments from across the course, even if you only teach in this one, and you try to say, all right, if I was a student and now I need to bring evidence of how do I develop my writing skills. Can I find evidence everywhere here? Yes, there's a lot of writing tasks that students, as they progress, they might fail here, but then they might do better here, here, and here. Collectively, they will find enough evidence that they are doing enough writing. But if you ask me now to show anywhere here, is there any evidence, for example, on describing personal values and explains how this influence action? You will be looking around and you will say, thank God to have the professional practice that there is a written video analysis, but actually is about a personal statement. But we had to plug it there in purpose. The alternative will be for us to say, all right, guys, we don't have any evidence for that. The students need to bring it. Is there anything we can do? Perhaps in biology, the writing task could become more about an action plan or something. It's very important to keep an eye, because if the students, they have no opportunities to practice these things, the whole of the portfolio is cancelled from day one. They're going to say why. Having said that, is not only that. That's one part, the assessed evidence. The second part is the other evidence. And the other evidence for us will be anything that they can do as extra curricula. A lot of our students work, and some of them actually they work in, well, waiters and waiters, it's all right, happens, but a lot of them, they might work in a local clinic as, like support, or they might be doing some of secretarial work and so on. Anything that is related to this, they can bring evidence from their work. So we had developed one very, very simple reference template that it will say, after you've done 4 or 5 weeks of work, can you get some sort of a reference from your manager or who is there? Or if you volunteer, can you get your volunteering certificate? Or if it is your local church, if you are religious and you go there and you show things and this is where you put your values and your values are Christian values or Muslim values, bring that. Anything is okay. There is a space for it to be to the additional assessed. However, we don't tell them you need to have one of each every term, but across the 3 years, we need to see a balance between your personal development and your assessed. So we developed a rubric, essentially, which is going to come with that. I'm going to show you it in a bit, where we say this is the expectation, these are the minimum kind of expectations for you to bring the evidence. And it works quite well. Quite comments? Or?
Sorry, I just want to ask the question at this point in time. Do you find with assessing these that rubrics is a good practice? Because in your rubric, obviously, you have achieved, not achieved, partially achieved, or however the assessment is structured. But the actual descriptions of what do I have to do in order to get achieved, that instructions as to what the student must do. Do you think the rubric is the best practice?
I would say some sort of. So by rubric I mean a visual instrument, a written instrument that actually shows what are the expectations. In our case, it was not defined. So our rubric had some generic information. I think it's better if I show it in a bit. But the template where the evidence go, they had a self-assessment and an action plan embedded. So that's the evidence of how I progress. That's where I believe I am as a learner in this capability. I believe I'm 3 out of 5. And that's what I aim to do as a reaction to my evidence. So if the evidence is I got 60% for my writing task, and the tutor says in the feedback, I'm good, I reference, I do well, but my ability of synthesizing things is not developed. What is my action plan? All right, my focus here is I'm good, I don't need to worry about referencing, I manage that, it's out. I really need to focus more on my critical synthesis. How can I do that? And I'll show you an example of a real portfolio. The student will say, I need to stop reading too much. I need to read less and more focused. Now, for a year 1 student to realize that is a very big thing. To say, I think I didn't get 70 or 80% because I downloaded 25 documents and I superficially synthesized them. Where my colleagues, they've done 10 in thorough, they managed to get 80%. So that's my strategy for next term. That's for the early portfolio, where it's actually about being a student. Another example will be, I'll give you the most extreme example of a student dropping the course as a result of the portfolio. It was on the capability around behaves with integrity. We sent students to the hospital, year 2. The student went to private hospital and a public hospital. And they witnessed the differences in quality and service and the stress. And the kind of, she felt that I cannot cope with this. If I end up in a public hospital, which more likely I'm gonna, I cannot cope with this thing. I felt extremely stressed by just witnessing what's happening. It's not for me. I would like to progress out and do something, for example, and move up in physiotherapy. Other students, they will say, I witnessed a 12-hour shift. Yeah, because keep in mind that it was real life expectations. When you go to a hospital, You go 5 in the morning when your person is available. Oh, well, we cannot think about this. Now, 19 years old thinking in year 1 that this is the future is actually a good thing. And the student decided to move and go to a different profession. And when we interview them, she said it was because of that realization. Of course, yeah, how they do it. So the other evidence is equally important. But here the problem will be more what is quality evidence. That's why we have templates for them to collect the other evidence. It's not just any random thing that you've done. It's a reference thing, it's an activity, a competency. Always you have to link it back to the framework. Very important from that point of view. Implementation. And that's a very important thing. So that's the course, sorry, not the course, the module, we call it unit in our university, where we hosted the portfolio. That was where the portfolio was a big part of. So I was responsible, I was teaching reflection 1, and then in weeks 8 I was teaching critical reflection, and then I was doing the debrief with them. So I was one of the tutors there, together with Sarah. And we had a number of tutors coming down. We also hired a totally independent GP from a local service. We pay her during the period of the milestone. The portfolio was freezing. So every July, we said to the students that the portfolio is now not operating. We cannot change anything. We just switch it off. And a professional GP together with the tutors, they will have a quick first look, not very thorough, but just to see, and she will randomly do some sampling to see if the quality of the evidence that you bring and the way that you write about your evidence is of good standards for a professional. So she doesn't know you, she's not a teacher, she is a GP, that she has also a passion for education. We didn't just get someone who understands portfolios, it's not just a random GP from that point of view. Which it was a good way of doing it. We didn't have to hire someone for the whole of the year. It was pretty much a 2 weeks salary for whatever it was, 200 portfolios, 300 portfolios. Normally, it will take her around 45 minutes to review a portfolio. So you can put a cost A, you can put it in your budget and say, yeah, it is a quarter of a salary of someone or whatever, it might be in our case, it might be $20,000 or something. That is the cost for reviewing the portfolios. But all the tutors, including the unit convener, myself as a guest tutor, career services, just name it, they can be part. So the big thing here is what we call a portfolio committee. So we run the whole enterprise having a portfolio committee, which was pretty much the academics or some of the academics in the course that they are willing to give us their time, some career advisors, and 1 or 2 professionals. And it's a model that keeps working quite well even now. And I propose that now for 8,000 students. Obviously not with one, but there will be with a number of them. And I will be the unit convener, so I will absorb a bit of the task. But the idea is to have, I'm interested to get industry in. So I want people outside the university, people from a bank, people from the government, whatever, that they will be looking at these portfolios and providing. There's a lot of learning development people outside universities. Every organization, they have their own learning development team. They retrained our students. They go through an induction to learn again communication skills. These people I want to get in to say, I want them to be ready for you, so you don't need to do all this retraining, or you will make your job easy. And they buy in this kind of concept. Okay? Now, these things, they also exist fully online, and that's the alternative model. So these things here, which is a week, is a self-contained unit that has a video about communication. So a student can also take it as an online 1 hour, 2 hours extracurricular, and they can study it. So they don't really need to come and do it if the unit was not accredited. Yeah, that's how it works. We also developed a particular unit for interprofessional clinical and health skills. So all of these things for interprofessional. Here they touch it a bit, but it's not so much. Obviously, just going to the portfolio, the technical challenges was the tool, and then of course how you can collaborate. But it's not your job to worry about the technical challenges. What your job is, after today, to be able to say, yes, that's the minimum things I want from any portfolio. I want somewhere that I can create my own templates. I want somewhere that I can witness things. I want also to upload videos or images and this. You give the parameters, you hand it in to the IT people, and you say, can I make it happen? And if they cannot, then we find a solution within your learning management system that they can handle all of these things as well, in that case. Now, before I continue, let me open up an example of a portfolio so we can see it in practice. Let me see if I can do that. Oh yeah, are we? Yes, we will. Is that the? 1, 2? Yeah, all good? All right. So, as I said, the tool that we had at the time, let me see if I can make this work quite well. It was a professional tool, a portfolio tool called PebblePad. We needed, so our responsibility as academics was to create what we call a workbook. So the very first thing we had to do digitally, and that can happen even if you just do Google Forms. So I will advise that the very first thing you do after you develop your framework is that you develop in the same way you have your logbooks and reflective books, whatever, you create your portfolio template, the big picture portfolio. In PebblePad used to be called Workbook, but it's actually the whole thing. The container, this, yeah, frankly speaking, is this. And you pre-populate there the different templates and the different expectations for the students. That's not something you can leave for students to do. They will never be able to do it. Or if they do it, you're going to get such a diversity of ways of writing and ways of addressing capabilities that you won't be able to assess. You don't want to give feedback on the structure. The structure should be given. You need to give feedback on their thinking and their reflection. So you will need to put that effort, or if you opt for a professional tool, 80% of them or 90% of them, they will have pre-populated templates ready, and that's the other thing that they sell to you. Plus, they will provide a service that you send them just a quick thing of what you need, like a little diagram, and they create the template for you. So PebblePad had an agreement with us, part of a clinical portfolios program that we run, because OSCEs, DOPS, things like that, they were not necessarily part of their repertoire. It's not generic, but they developed our own digital OSCE form or digital reflection form, the way we want it. Also to work, very, very important, to need to work offline. If you do work integrated learning, the most important requirement for the portfolio is that students, they can access the templates offline, so they can fill them in, they can do what they do in the workplace, and once they go online, they automatically synchronize with their portfolio. All of the portfolio, they are professional vendors, they will now do that. There will be a template, it's going to be as easy as connect, reflection, I want to record the reflection, here's the reflection, what I'm doing, I've just attended Panos' workshop, I think I learned something, but I still need to do it. When you put your action plan, next time you are connected, that will coordinate. Some of them, they are sophisticated enough, and this is now I'm giving you tips for what to ask if you want, to have digital signatures, just by using your finger. So you are in a clinic, or you are in a pharmacy, or in a pharmacy in a clinic, in a hospital, and you are, someone is observing you doing a particular thing, you do it, the person quickly writes the comment, they digitally sign it, it's there. You don't run with a paper, can you please sign my form? It's on the book. The most advanced I have seen is also a GPS activation that stamps the date, the time, and the location of the form. So the student actually cannot download the form, you know, in the evening because their pharmacist is a friend or something, and they can sign it off. It has to be, you know, it is in the location. So it will look a bit like that. That was, so for this one, it was located at Macquarie University at the time of production on that date, and how many times they modified. So you know these kind of things. Okay? But the way we structure it was to follow that document, an introduction, so they can tell them what they want, and then for each of the big picture capabilities, scientist and scholar, engaged citizen, professional, and then an overall reflection, they had a section in their portfolio. So the introduction was very much, let me see if I can pull this thing a bit, the showcase. Is there a way we can make it the showcase a bit better? It's a PDF. I go for full? Yes. Okay. All right. No, it's all right. You don't need to read the whole thing. I'll just explain to you. So it's that's very much the philosophy of the portfolio. That's the model that I told you that we run. Then this is still kind of the theoretical aspect. Now this is an executive summary table for that particular thing on one piece of evidence. So here a student, they decided to link an assignment that they've done in one of the units of study, this one, and tell us why this is the best evidence they can show us around being a scientist. And here is the reflection. So if you can read it, says this evidence given, including my Bio's assignments, is that I have realized that analyzing introductions within scientific methods provide the best means of blah, blah, blah. I'm fully aware that I need to improve with the feedback incorporated. Yeah. So that's year one student, 18 years old, arriving from the university in the that assignment was the second assignment, so it will be week 5 in the university. So a week 5 student in the university will be asked to write, unpack the feedback, and do it. Now, if I click on that, let me see if it takes me. So this is now good for me because it's a PDF from that, which means that when I assess it, I don't need to be online. I can download the whole thing, but still links things together, creates a table of content. So I know now on page 54 of that portfolio, I can go and I can see, hopefully, yeah, and here is the template. It was on the 23rd of May. Here is the assignment, if I want to see it, to verify it myself. Got 90%, so it's actually a good performing student. And then is an explanation about how this assignment relates to that capability from the student. So you see the connection? I want the best evidence from the students. The student make a judgment that this is an evidence for that capability, put it there, and put it. Now, this is bad. This is the feedback that the student got from the assignment. Yeah? So that was beyond the control of the portfolio. The tutor who marked the assignment 90%, which is, I suppose, a very good assignment, the only thing that said to the student in writing was a very nicely written report and good referencing. However, too much detail in some places. So now that the portfolio asked them to unpack the feedback and an action plan, the students will have problems. So we need to educate the academics to say the student is going to use your feedback. Is important. And they improved later on in the years. But imagine that was a 50%. Yeah? And here the only thing you said is a badly written report. You are all over the place and you don't know how to reference. Full stop. And then you ask the student to bring evidence of developing their scientific. They don't know how to do it. That came strong from the interview with the students, that some of the tutors, they didn't give them feedback. They couldn't work the detail of the portfolio. So now, if we take this to the micro level, which is you only use this only in your own unit or module, the feedback that you will give, you need to align it to that. So the students, they can unpack it and they can see. So too much detail in places, what does it mean? That you are overwriting, you don't know how to synthesize. Is it the synthesis that is lacking? Is it the criticality, the analysis? Give them a trigger so they know how to action plan. That's an important part from that. That's and unpacking the feedback form. So that's another piece of feedback here. A very nicely written assignment with excellent referencing. However, use of referring to images in text needs to be improved. So the connection with images and how you put, like, that's the only thing. But anyway, the person did some sort of an unpacking. So that is a form that we give them. Feedback, areas of improvement, the strengths, and plan to address the feedback, how you're going to go about. Okay, I must limit the inclusion of unnecessary visual information from now on. I will consistently, critically, quality, relevance to visual experience, and so on. They got the point that there is something they need to do. And that's the easy one. That's about academic skills. But you can see how the portfolio works. Any comments or questions?
I just want to ask, so specifically for this example that you are showing, they have to have the knowledge of the subject in order to display these skills.
The students?
Yes. So I just want to know, how do you then actually, do you test knowledge per se with this portfolio, or just the skills? Just the skills. So which platform are they then using apart from this? Then they have the traditional exams to test knowledge, or
themselves, including the exams where they can be published, but normally all the written assessments, they are given to them into their learning management system. Yeah. So on Sakai or any platform that you have, this is where they get the knowledge. What we want from them is only when it's relevant to bring skills around the scientific aspect, they can link that to the portfolio and they unpack it. But the majority, but for us, I'm not going to be so if you failed an assignment in your physics, you can still pass the portfolio. Actually, if you reflect well and you demonstrate how you want to improve, you might get a distinction in your portfolio. We had students that they got an average 55% across the thing, but they got a 65 or 75% in the portfolio. However, it's not just because you're always saying that I'm going to be improving, but you are not doing. So if you are a good student, you have a bad couple of weeks, but then you show progress across the portfolio. So the mark for the portfolio comes together with improvement in your marks in the task. It's very fine line, because some people are going to say, so if you are failing in everything and you are actually knowing, is it good enough to pass the portfolio? Well, it's not good enough. It's good enough at the beginning in the milestone 1 where we say get awareness, but then you need to put these things in action. So the action plan will follow you. Knowledge, cognate knowledge and skills, the portfolio will be primarily about skills. However, given that we agreed that scientist and scholar is one of the domains, but it's only 1/3 of the domains, you bring here any relevant cognitive information that you can tell us, but not everything. So they pick the best evidence. That's the idea. So you show us the best evidence. Some of them, they go directly, 90% from day 1, I have. Some of them, they will struggle to find the best evidence. So their best evidence will be the failing. Yeah? But they are not assessed based if you are a good student overall, you are a good student in the portfolio. You can be an excellent student, but you don't care at all about your professional growth. So your portfolio will suffer.
Formative assessment or summative assessment.
So if you do portfolio, it's 100% portfolio. Actually, 60% portfolio, because we have a policy in our university that you need to have at least 2 pieces of assessment. It's 60% portfolio and 40% showcase of the portfolio, a small presentation, very similar to the 3-minute thesis. You can stand in front of an audience and you just present what you became. If you do a portfolio in connection to your units, normally, I will say that the most typical for us will be that around 25% of the mark, there will be the reflection portfolio component. Some of them, they have 10%, but 10% is a bit easy to do. I would say the amount of time it takes. So if you have 3 pieces of assessment and a portfolio assessment, for them to reflect on the 3 pieces of assessment, you better give them a good 20-25%. So that would be another model. You have constantly a 20% or 25% of your assessment in each of the units or modules devoted to the portfolio. Yeah, that's how
Yes, 2 things. So your students can actually add as much evidence as they want. So for instance, if this student added this evidence in the first 5 weeks, then maybe he did something else that actually is better evidence, so you can add in week 7 again, and in week 9, and then at a stage you freeze the portfolios, and then so you don't have timelines for them, micro timelines in that sense. You leave them to put in whatever they want to put in until it freezes. Okay.
This is where the portfolio freezes. In the between, you tell them that they have to be doing. Now, because in that model, keep in mind that the portfolio is part of an ongoing module, the module itself has tutorials where students, they go and they practice the portfolio. So some students, they will leave it to the last month, to June, to do it. But that's still a much better approach of 2-3 months than to leave it to year 3 to be able, which is the other common practice. Everybody thinks about portfolios at the end. So we don't want to micromanage the portfolio to say every month we need to see evidence, but having a tool like PebblePad, on a click of a button, I can see who submits what at what time. So at least I can proactively go to someone and say, it's halfway through the semester, you haven't even put the very simple evidence, the first type of assessment that you haven't done. You could, and then just email it, but you'll never actually pose it to assess it at that level. It's very micro level.
They can actually put any evidence there. You don't prescribe anything, because we were just talking about the pharmacy students. They have now that evidence of a communication skill development from their first year, which are very specific activities. But now you can actually tell them, okay, even if they don't want to put the Patch Adams reflective activity in, if there's some other evidence that they have about their communication, they can put that in.
If I can do that here. So I can show you the two phases of the portfolio. The portfolio on the student's point of view and the portfolio from the academics. Because what I show you in the PDF is my version, what the student officially submits to me. But the students, they have their own version of portfolio. They can keep doing things. See if we will connect sometimes. They have a lot of security stuff. Any other questions as we have some typing? Either for technical or pedagogical? I might be in actually, which is good. So this one was from 20. I might just show you one from the same. Okay, so this is one module, yeah, professional practice 1. That's where we have all the information about the portfolio. Okay, so you can see here the portfolio is 40% for that particular thing. And they have, all the information about what is reflection, they can train, so it's actually well developed. They have access to their portfolio, hopefully by clicking here, if that will allow us to connect. So every student, from wherever they are, and that's the different thing, wherever they are in the course, any module, they can connect to one place. It's not a different portfolio from my module to your module. It's one portfolio, which connects, and people, they can go from introduction to anatomy to their portfolio and put. So that's me as a student. I have access to my resources as a student, which I can. So if I'm myself, I just came out from a practicum, and the practicum had a number of things, feedback for me to act before I go back. I, the lecturer, ask the students, once you receive your report from the clinic, from the practice, everybody either gonna go and do a smart action plan, or you're gonna do a what, so what, now what, depending what you wanna do, or you can have a structured reflection, or you can have a generic entry, experience, a competency, an activity, all of these things are available to them online and on the mobile. So if I go to show what, now what, takes a bit of time for us here. This thing will enter. Okay, please enter the title of this reflection. I might just put participation in a seminar. Participation, yeah, something like that. When, this is when, only one time. What is that you've done? I experienced this and this and this. So what have you learned? How does this relate? This is something that I can ask to be developed for me. I can have my version. This is a generic one. Now what? And once I've done it, I can save it on my own, on my space, or I can submit it to my workbook, which is my portfolio thing. That's how the things work. So I can save it, and then I can go. Now, I'm going a bit back without saving. Competency. Again, this is developed to assist a bit with practicum, so it's about dependent, assisted, minimal supervision or proficient, any kind of observation that you've done, the supervisor does that, who was the assessor, add digital signature. Yeah, so I will click here. Here I need to put the title, I know, but normally it will happen and I will sign it. I could collect all of this information easily. And it's also easy for the supervisor. You will hand them this. The big problem we have from clinicians, they say, well, the students, they come in the middle of the thing, we have 1 second to do, they hand different forms from different universities, we're confused, are you from Macquarie, are you from Sydney? Your form talks about competency, your form talks about other things. At least this one has a consistent approach. Every student across the university who is doing, let's say, competency, who might agree to have this form. It is a recognizable Macquarie form. Yeah, that's how it goes. Now, that's the assessment center. That's me now having access to assessing the portfolio of a student. So I have so this is the workplace. So for every intake of students, I can create my big folder. That is, this is all 100 students, they belong to that intake. Let's take intake student workspace. And these are the submissions of their digital portfolios. So the student, they will submit a portfolio, and I can see it. This is if I want to download the whole thing. Let's get Isabel, because I also have it in the video, and I get permission to use here, which is good. So that's how the PDF looks like live, if I want to dip in. Yeah. So this is actually a workbook from a placement. It's slightly different, but that's how it goes. So learning contract, placement logs and reflections. This is what they do. So that's the learning contract that she signed with us before she went on placement. Okay. For example, I need to work with the Center for Health Informatics during the data collection phase of their patient work project to gain understanding, to develop the activity and plan an action. I need to analyze recordings of patient lifestyle and daily health task capture, gain understanding, and when I need to do it. Very, very systematically done as an action plan. Okay. Then they had the first quarter placement. And obviously, some of them are confidential documents, so not everybody will have access, because I was not assessing that. But you will see that in that log, the student has put a particular asset, which is a placement log. How many hours they've done, the logs. This is forms we developed. Hour by hour, what they've done, what activities, supervisor, here she did the signature. So supervisor tell us that this person spent all this information and they've done it. Yeah, previously, this form most likely will be lost somewhere. You know, it's like, oh, I can't remember where my times are and so on. Here, there's no way, and if I want, I can verify that, which is important. Just going a bit back. Second quarter placement, 21 to 40. So that was in hours blocks, so that was done. Couple of evidence. Yeah, these are confidential outside, unfortunately. But here will be data sets that she worked and the outcome that she got out of the activity with an authorization that she has completed. I think the top one will be like that. Okay. Now going a bit so this is the placement workbook. This is an example of a workbook. I can go and see a graduation portfolio. So what they've done in the final thing, the showcase portfolio. So that will be a graduation portfolio. Let's follow here. Isabel, I think. So that's a graduation portfolio. It's a summary of all the other year 1, year 2 portfolios. So scientist, give us evidence. She linked one here. The best to showcase it after all the other. So I know she has around 20 things that she put, but that is the big thing that she puts out in the showcase to graduate. Like if you ask her where is the best attempt of you to do that, this was the unit, the human health, and then there was, for this one, 6 linked assets. I can click here. Yeah, all the different types of assessments here. I can check. I go to something less like socially and culturally. Okay, so from attending 3-hour seminars with a lecturer, I've learned a variety of things about my predecessors, blah, blah, blah. Identified. Now, there is no way that someone will be able to do that in year 3 unless they had captured it somewhere. So this reflection potentially was captured already, and once she was deciding if it is the best, she was putting it over there. So there's 2 linked assets, which are a series of reflections from lectures in week 4 and 5 from professional practice. And then another 3 links. Yeah, she did an aromatherapy totally outside the course, an aromatherapy thing. She believes help her with her internal well-being or whatever. And over here. And these are informal groups that she was attending to help mentor other students. So they initiated a little kind of informal group to assist other students called Emily's Groups. So there's 2 slides where she shows what she's done to help other people. So 2 non-assessed in a way, and 1 which is the written report on the topic of social well-being. You get the picture? That's how portfolio works. Now, if I can download, so the student can keep this for life. That's the important thing. So once they graduate, they get automatically an e-portfolio copy through the company with their own personal email, and they can keep it for life. But anything that's been submitted to the workbook, it stays with us. So that's the important thing. You can play with this, so I can print it, I can give a quick thing, I can write a comment, I can send it to someone else to comment. So it's actually a community of people there. Sorry.
To ask, so for example, you say, how does your evidence relate to this capability statement? How would I know whether I would answer it satisfactorily?
think clear. So somewhere here, there will be a reference to the capability itself and what we expect. That's why the rubric, in a way, is important, that you know that a capability statement about develops a professional practice is using the appropriate vocabulary and she has quality evidence. It will come, that's why having professionals, having a career advisor, depending what you are looking to give feedback, yeah. But it's not academic writing. I'm not gonna give them mark for the way she writes. What I say here is, all right, you provided evidence that they are maybe okay. You, the academic, know that there's another 5 opportunities in the course to have better evidence. But the student, for whatever reason, either maybe didn't attend or they failed the particular assessment. So this is the best they can do. So you already have a bit of an idea what is a quality evidence and what is not. And the student will get the feedback. Okay? Systems focus, that was one of the most difficult. Yeah, so that's, I suppose, an activity that they've done. So they've done a presentation about rural healthcare in Australia, and the only evidence he had about systems was that. Okay, maybe it's good enough. Other students, though, that they've done a placement with the Health Innovation Center analyzing data for systems, they have stronger evidence for that capability. So the students is not going to be getting excellent and exemplar or anything. So this student, obviously, she didn't want to have a placement with data and analytics or things. Maybe she was getting into more social-oriented skills, and she evidenced better. So the quality of the evidence, depending also of what is the action plan and the direction of the student. Not everybody needs to be excellent.
I think it's just a matter of knowing what you want to achieve with the assessment and how you're going to allocate marks to it and for what. So if it's just an observation mark or just a participation mark, I don't think they have to be that clear of a rubric or assessment criteria, but when it depends on what you want to assess.
Yes. And again, it's not an assessment of the type. Numerical, have you done enough? And have you used enough justification in your narrative to convince me that this is good evidence? That's all. Yeah? It's not an opportunity. Now, if I go to the overall reflection for the overall course, so that's across all 20 units of study, 20 modules of study. Okay, so the graduation summary reflection. Oops. Sorry. So reflect on the personal and systemic university factors that have been most influential in your development as a scientist in the last year. Now here, let's see if we can make this a bit better. Go down a bit. Reflect on the personal and systemic factors that has been as a scholar. So they write roughly 300 words per key capability. This is not linked to any particular evidence, but this is to get the overall feeling whether they know what they're talking about. So especially the clinician, the GP, she will read this and they will say, that's still far away from, if you're presenting this as your standpoint of being a scientist and scholar, you are far from that. So that's how it goes in the final one. Okay? So what I would like us to do now go now? All right. Online people can type this, but I want each of the team, or if you want to talk together, on the green, write down a number of skills that you believe are absolutely important to be showcased from a professional point of view in your area. It could be communication, you can repeat, I'm not, a lot of them are there. But then most importantly, I want you to write down what type of evidence, assessed or otherwise, would you like to see. If I was standing in front of you to tell you I'm a good communicator, write down what type of evidence would you like to see. Just to get a feeling, this is almost like the first work for creating that. If we get this document right, this one is going to happen. This took us 3 months, this took us 20 days, to set up, because we cannot agree on that. Then you can handle this to an IT person, they will fill it up for you. It's not a big thing. So green is skills, blue is evidence. At least 2, 3 in each group. But it's going to be good to know also the evidence that you have in your mind. come together to get some idea about the things, and then as we speak, it will be interesting to see how can we put that evidence in a portfolio. Is it something that can happen? Is it direct, or has to go through a template, or has to be turned into a reflection? Anyone who is willing to start? I'll have the microphone. There's a microphone waiting there, maybe. You have a few online guys, girls, ladies. You can also type a few things. They are quiet. What can we do? They're quiet, are they? Okay, I'm going to switch off this so you can have that microphone.
So we collaborated because we come from physiology and then psychology. So we took some integrated, some of the skills. So the first one's communication, and then we also leveled it according to, let's say, maybe at the end of year one or whatever, how you would go about looking at the evidence. So skill one is communication, and then we would start with the basic presentation in year one, just doing that. And then the second evidence would be a scenario and role play, if you are able to do that in a smaller class. And then third, we would do practical experience, and then also the supervision and feedback would make up a great role in seeing the evidence of communication. Yeah. And then decision making. So we said that we would set up a scenario at the first level, and then, I can't see. Okay, discussing the possible options and then the consequences with regards to decision making as a first level of teaching. Second, we would go into practical experience and supervision, again, the process of monitoring and just guiding and giving feedback. Okay, do we have to go through all of them?
No, that's right.
Okay.
All of them are going to be assessed evidence. Yep, so my understanding is going to be... All right, listen, I'm going to use this one because I'll keep... Should be okay now? Yeah, checking. All right. So the big question here for you will be, how do you present this to the students as a piece of assessment? Either you have a template where the students, as part of their scenario, they directly write their reflection, what was the best thing I learned about communication, or so on. You could add an element of peer assessment, which can also become stronger evidence, like, I'm not interested in actual your performance so much, but what I want to see as evidence is the feedback you received and how you act on the feedback. So there's different layers. I suppose year one students arriving, it might be safer to have the direct piece of evidence, which is the assessment itself, upload it there, and then unpack it and tell us what is the best thing about it, what is the worst thing, and what you're going to be doing as a result. But then in the year two, as you explained in the communication, given it is going to be more of a scenario, simulation, maybe you want to get the feedback from the audience, and you have the peer assessment as part of it. So that's all possible, which is great. And it can be done using a tool like PebblePad, using the template, but also can be done using submitting these kind of forms into the online space that you have, like Sakai, which work okay. Thank you. Your comments? Decision making is a good one. We didn't have it as a specific thing, but it is one. It's actually the top from the skills that comes from all the reports.
Yeah, while they were saying decision making, I said to Gerda, yeah, this is also important in our. We took an example. Theology and health sciences is developing interdisciplinary qualification called Pastoral and Palliative care. And specifically, they also want to utilize a portfolio of assessment now when we have to. We didn't come far because it is really an intensive program. If you think about palliative care, so we must first see who's our target market in order to determine what is needed. So we said, well, will the target market be pastors or ministers doing this, or the other way around? So there's much pre-planning going into developing this framework. I think much more than you think, because you think you know, but when you start discussing, you realize, So we said, we obviously said in this type of situation, from my limited understanding, and Prof Gerda helped me, that palliative is actually, there's no turning back. So it's on the last days, and how do we support them, because it's care. So obviously we said the person or the graduate must be able to obviously communicate to that person, or facilitate communication. You don't necessarily have to heal the wounds and do those qualified health professional work. Then you have to get somebody in. So decision making is very important, because when do you decide who to get in and when?
But for the sake of argument, we would just say that building trust or building rapport was one of our things. What, in a scenario like that, very, very powerful, emotional, complicated scenario, what can you expect from that person to bring as evidence? That would be the difficult thing. Some people, they might pass in and say, oh, reflection. They can just go in that situation, come out, but the reflection will be emotional, they will be sometimes biased, and so on.
So we said it depends on the context and the severity. Well, it is severe, but I mean, we said, well, communication, then ethics of care. Yes. We said, well, it could be empathy, it could be respect. There's a whole thing going on, or different terms of ethics of care, and then understanding the cultural, or understanding the culture and the context. So we would say, yes, reflection strategies, but because it's maybe you must regard ethics, maybe like Renee Marie also said, you can simulate this, not with a real patient then, but simulate this scenario and do a video recording of how this student is then actually dealing with this situation in terms of explaining or displaying evidence of communication. So I think, and we said peer review or peer assessment. Yes. Observation. Yes, that's that simulation situation, but that's how far we got. We couldn't discuss further.
No.
I don't know if anybody else wants to add something.
You can pass it through, but that's when you go to the behaviors as opposed to the skills, because that's also part of the portfolio. This is where you're going to go more to more biased type of evidence, and the way to make them less biased is to start playing with direct with observations, with feedback from the people, in order to, so someone come out from a situation that you describe, they might be emotionally, and they feel they didn't do a good job, and they put there and they said, oh my God, I mean, I don't know what I've done. But if someone was actually, you really demonstrated empathy, and that's how. Another, of course, just going to the other extreme, is that this person, in preparation for that scenario, and that's where portfolio comes handy, they know that they're going to go into a difficult situation. They know that they are in year 2. So it's not going to be a 3 years, it's going to be more of more compact. But they know they lack the skill of building rapport. They don't have enough, and they cannot find any evidence. What they can do, maybe they need to get some training, additional training, before they go into the situation. So having a certificate, for example, of reflective practice, or if that thing exists, or doing an online course where you learn some techniques about influencing. This can be the easy evidence. So I prepare to the best of my ability to go to that. And that's what I said, the extracurricular things. And then they balance this with whatever happens in the real life, either the observation or the reflection.
When you expose them to this real life simulations, like you said previously, maybe they will decide, no, we're going to drop this qualification, it's not for me. But they won't know it unless you actually make this so practical. Yes.
Yeah, I agree. But I'm a fan of extracurricular, because the world is full of information. They need to know what they don't know. That's a big skill. If the portfolio can do something, it's that. They know where they stand. And then look where other opportunities. In life, you'll never get the full package in your job. I mean, at work, how many of you go when you do additional thinking? When I went to the medical school, coming from philosophy, I did a fully online course on medical terminology, because obviously the people there assume that I had. I did, but not in particular area. So I was going to a meeting and I was trying to see, what is this acronym? What is this council they talk about? 3 hours later, in the evening, all right, I got it. But it was self-initiated, yeah? Because I managed to, this is the type of thing I was talking about. Thank you. Couple of,
Okay, from a pharmacy side, there's also communication, teamwork. You have to know how to work with co-workers, with other professionals in the same environment, and also with patients. So you have your simulated role play, or you can go out at the workplace, and it can also be peer review or other professionals that can say you were competent or not in a real situation. And then there's the dispensing skills. We have the simulated pharmacies. Then they have to do it there. And then also in holidays time, they go out in workplace and they can also get feedback. Were they competent? Can they dispense? So that, and then they have the reflection as well to give feedback. Then handling of medications, so the legislation, they must know there's formal assessments, and then they also go out into the workplace, and then they have to order scheduled medicine, say Schedule 5 and 6, how is it different from other schedules and front shop, and are they competent? That's also peer review, all from the supervisors at the facility, and they must know how to discard the different medication. And also waste management is biohazardous, so it's in a workplace. So all the competencies must be there, and then they can give also reflection back on that. And then they have to do problem solving, they have to think on their feet. So there's case studies that they can do, assignments, and then they have to be in the workplace, dispense to people, can consult, and then there's the clinical skills, OSCEs, and when they're in clinics, there is supervisors, and also can say, are they competent or not, and then also reflection back, and how they're going to improve.
Absolutely. I mean, the case now, I'm just going back to the Doctor of Medicine course for a second, where we ask the students to put everything in their portfolio, not just the best, because that's a requirement. We need to know every single DOP, every single OSCE, every single thing in the form you're going to register. However, when it comes to the assessment, we want them to assemble a story of how they progress. So we don't want to assess all 20 OSCEs. Just sample and show the growth. So I have, I started there, and that was my feedback. That's how I improved for the second observation. And now that's where I'm competent, and that's the signature of my supervisor certifying that. So out of the 20, it might be 3 that they make it to the 2 versions. So in my personal, I will just keep logging everything. In what I'm going to put out as a showcase at the end for the assessment, it will be there, the progress. So it's the story. It makes a difference to how you're going to structure the template. Put evidence. We don't want 145 evidence, because you will never be able to assess them to the detail you want. You want them to be able to identify what is good evidence. Yeah. But if you want to have example of the bad evidence, students should have them available, that they collect them on a request. That's how we do it. Thank you. Couple of things.
So when I did the assignment, I thought of my specific module and of the first study unit, which is evidence-based decision-making for dietitians. And of course, evaluating such a skills like decision-making is very difficult. So what I thought was that for evidence, students should be able to demonstrate that they use the available best scientific evidence. So they should showcase that they searched for it. So maybe a search strategy could be evidence for that, and also the publications that they found from their search, and then how they then went about with the literature to come to a conclusion. So maybe a literature review might then be also a reflection of that, and then of course the conclusion would be very important, because in the conclusion recommendation they will then show how they would decide on treating that specific problem. Then the next one that I thought of is also then to translate the evidence to certain stakeholders. So that's also something that's difficult for our students. We use them, we teach them to do it in a scientific way, so they are very comfortable to communicate science to the academics, yes, but they are not so comfortable to communicate that to other stakeholders. So for instance, if the decision that they needed to make was on food sold in a school, on a schoolyard, then maybe to translate that information to the school's principal or to someone working or selling food at the school. So case studies there and role play, I thought might be good to showcase.
They're all very good example. I will just comment on the second one, because you need also to be open to the opportunity that they can showcase some skills outside your curriculum. So if I was interested in seeing, and I give you an example from our students, how they can reveal information or influence a non-academic outside, I will say, for example, what about you run a healthy eating campaign for a school. So that will be one part. You've done your literature review and you find all the evidence, but the second assessment is not going to be a case study, an artificial case study in a way. What I want you to do is to go out and find your local school, your local community, or your local church, whatever you are in your community, and just put together one flyer, one podcast, whatever you believe will be the thing, to try to influence. That will be a stronger piece of evidence to put in your portfolio. And then when you go later on to showcase this, you will say, by the way, I have developed 2 communication campaigns already. Great. So, and you'll find this attention. Always, we want to have the evidence ourselves, because we know what we have in our case studies, we know the quality. We need to a bit let it go for the non-assessed evidence. I suppose the same will go to some like decision making. Will you trust a reference if the student happens to work in McDonald's or whatever, yeah, and they made a decision totally, but is actually a decision maker, actually runs the team there? Would you accept a reference from the mother to say this person really is decisive, he can take us out of this situation? I would say yes, not only that, but I would say that will contribute a lot. Because keep in mind that their life could actually involve a lot of these skills on a number of ways. On the component about the literature review and so on, I think it's great that you break it down to the different aspects of the activity, searching for the information, putting it into a paper or an essay, and then synthesizing. And the students should be able to extract from their paper and their assignment and showcase where exactly they've done it. And that's great. You almost ask them to break down the feedback and play it back to you, which is a skill to develop and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. I took the 3 domains that you have in your framework. So it's scholarly scientist, engaged citizen, and professional. It's not on any particular level, because I think the evidence will differ from level to level. On the highest level for a scholarly scientist activity, I have pharmacist-initiated therapy. So they must show evidence that they can initiate therapy. So that will be the assessments in pharmacology and clinical pharmacy. So that will actually be formal assessments, written exams, oral exams, OSCEs, whatever. Then for the engaged citizen, I looked at the socially and culturally capable. Patient counselling. They should have evidence of establishing existing understanding and knowledge of the health condition of the patient. So that is taking down a patient history. So the evidence will be the actual document. And then in communication, they should have evidence of using active and reflective listening skills. That could be on the one level, could be the patient simulation assessment, or then the actual interview that they had with the patient in the clinic.
I agree. If I'm allowed only on the active listening, you may want to start with the bare minimum, which is demonstrate active listening within the class. Yeah, like showcase how did you, or within your teamwork, if you have groups work. And then you build it, like learn how much are you an active listener outside the professional context. You pay attention to things, and then you build it to level 2 and level 3, which is great. So don't underestimate the power of the framework around portfolios in year 1 in particular to get students to the nice habits in being students. And we've seen that working really, really well in our case, which is great. Have a comment?
I think it's, like you said initially, you have to make it very discipline specific. And I can just maybe share from my previous profession, well, not profession, my previous job. I was a lecturer for a long time before coming to the Center of Teaching and Learning. And I used to lecture the educational psychology honours students. And specifically, we had them also to do a portfolio where they had to choose one of the topics, whatever they've been taught in this honours module, being it motivation strategies or learning strategies or inclusive education, whatever they find personal interest in, but it was more of a free scope. And they had to go and show the planning towards that, like you said, the literature review, building up your knowledge base of this, but because it's now on an honours level, it's more research based in terms of what the curriculum is describing, and then actually go and, but I believe in health it's more risky, but for education it's not that risky. So we could have asked them to go and implement a strategy to improve learning in the classroom, well, of course under the supervision of the teacher. And they had to do video recordings, they had to do a pre and a post test analysis or whatever intervention they had. And by means of that, we also threw in community engagement. So they also had to mean something to the community, maybe by means of a campaign, and they really enjoyed it. But you have to have the buy-in of the student, and I think at honours level it's easier because they can see the appropriateness of that to their career. And I think that is important to have those first years realize what is it actually that I'm going to do with this skill. Yeah, so I just testify from my own experience that I think this is really, it's a powerful tool that allows creativity and actually allow collaboration between the students, and by means of collaborating, yes, yeah.
No, that's I think the important thing that you will see being problematic sometimes is the discipline aspect of the portfolio. Most of the universities, they will say, why do we need to have 20 different variations of communication skills? Why every discipline they need to develop a framework? Why you don't use the graduate attributes? And the answer is that any evidence we have from any employer we've spoken, anything, they value the professional identity. They expect that a lawyer will display a particular communication skill, a health person, a particular, in theology a particular, and so on. So we asked them, from our point of view now being in the humanities, what will be in the humanities? In the humanities they said students should be able to automatically connect with the bigger political and societal agenda. We need to see that we hire them so they can filter immediately what we say. A business, we want them because they have this growth mentality. So we cannot have one version. It's not going to work for us. So in our communication skills, when we define them, we will add you are able to communicate or filter communication from the perspective of social justice. You wouldn't, maybe you put that in the thing, but if you put that in the business, it will be good to do it because it will drive, but it will drive a different behavior. Yeah. In the same, when we ask, like, would you teach work ethics? If you teach work ethics, the very first thing we're going to tell you is how do you treat your colleagues, the shifts, and then you go to a hospital that everybody is frustrated and everybody is running, and you witness all the breach of work ethics happening. What does it, if you do it, is a good thing, but a lot of us will say, we're not going to add this. Let's talk about being overall ethical. So my attitude is the more precise we can be, the more outcomes we can take out for the portfolio. Because it's different for me to reflect on, are you a good person? As to, have you been a good person when you interact with your students in the class? I can tell you if I'm a good person there or whatever. It's very different. That's a model of assessment. When I'm going to do it a bit here. Okay, so for this elementary type of thing, which is the clinical science, we give marks on the portfolio. Now, we were asked to use our university procedure, which is outstanding all the way to developing. Yeah, so outstanding, advanced, proficient, functional, developing. So that's how the university is using distinction, high distinction, distinction, credit, pass, fail. So we still map it to the university's framework, but the students, they don't see the numerical aspect and the C, Ds, and Ps. They just see if they're outstanding, proficient, functional. Even the failings, we call them developing. You're not failing in the portfolio, you are developing, but you are not meeting standards. You know, that's, and provides a very good attitude. Because, okay, I'm just develop, how can I become, you need to graduate at least functional, minimum functional. But we are aiming to create outstanding. Now, we are not, you know, how many things? So we say to them that you will get some sort of marks, if you're going to believe the mark system. The outstanding student makes regular contributions to the portfolio throughout the semester. Yeah, so that is a very quick win to stop the students just doing it in July. For me, it's just a matter of a click of a button to see that Panos has been doing contributions every month. I can check this within 20 seconds in the portfolio. So I tell to the students that's the easiest way to get a lead into the portfolio. Just make contribution, even if these are short contributions. All the way to meet some milestones, or you don't meet the milestones. Makes additional contributions to what is expected. If you're going to be outstanding, you get additional bonus marks for that. Quantity of evidence. So we ask them to make these 8 aspects, if you're going to look at them all together. And we say that for outstanding, yes, you need to provide evidence across the whole of the spectrum of the framework. But you can actually just do it, and we agree that 5 of them is going to be the minimum we expect. That will be a decision you'll have with your people, how many you want to do. And then you have the quality of the evidence. So these 3 things are automated. The portfolio gives you a report, and you can give automatically 15 marks to the students for doing it on time and providing 3, 5, 6, so on. That is where the quality comes, and this is where we ask this community committee to come and provide. So evidence clearly, so it's about relation to the aspect. How do you make that connect? You ask me, how do you know that they meet the capability statement? Well, that paragraph will be one of the most important evidence. Can they show how an observation that happened from a colleague in the class is the best evidence for them being a good communicator, as opposed to the assignment that, and to be honest, the more they can go out of the assessed into the real world, the better quality the evidence. That's how, and they know that from the criteria. And then they go to, I'm not, by quality of writing, mostly about the quality of reflective writing, to be honest. So it's about, does it make sense, and is this, so these are kind of the domains around quantifying an aspect, and then quality of the reflection, the quality of the evidence. And how, that's how we give them the feedback. I would be happier if this was just a pass-fail. but for university expectations, they don't now, though, give us a different idea. The university is moving towards credentials and badges, this kind of external recognition, on transferable skills. So this portfolio will be a ready-made mechanism, especially because it goes from outstanding. If you are an outstanding, you can claim a badge. Or maybe we can say if you are advanced and outstanding, you can claim a badge. If you are over here, maybe you can submit it and then you can do some additional mentorship in order to get your badge. So you will graduate with a Bachelor of Clinical Science and an outstanding communicator, team leader, and so on. So that's, we want to link this to the bigger picture of the university, so they are ready. So they know other degrees that they don't have the portfolio. If the students want to do that, they will have to spend a huge amount of effort writing a big application to take this fellowship or whatever you're going to be calling it. These guys are going to be ready. That's how we go. Okay? It's nothing new there. It's evidence, frequency, and quality. These are the three criteria that you play. Frequency and evidence numerical, it should be just a random check from you and automatically. And it's powerful though, because students, they know how they go about it. Okay. That's the programmatic assessment framework I was talking about. I managed to find an image of it, which says that the complete degree, it's normally 3 years in Australia or in Europe. The students, they do training activities, assessment activities, supporting activities. And then in the portfolio, you just combine, you put the cycle, and you say this and this and this and this collectively are my best things for that particular capability. And then at some point, a committee comes and reviews all your combinations of evidence and gives the feedback. Okay? So if you put programmatic assessment in the, you will find the framework, you will find the publications, and it's a very good framework to use to support. I will come back to that if we have a bit of time. It's more around how you can make it sustainable. Can you hear?
Not so good mark, reacted negatively, and think learning how to unpack feedback and think what went wrong, how can I go about improving it. I've really been able to take a positive approach and think about, okay, how can I develop my skills for the future.
So just play that video because that actually students working on their portfolio. Yeah, so these are now team of 3 using their iPads or anything that they've done. They came together for the portfolio, and that was good. It was another opportunity to compare their evidence and say, what is your quality? They gave them an opportunity for another meeting and support and help them qualify and so, oh, maybe that's your best evidence. Why didn't you use that? It was fantastic looking at it from that point of view, which is very good. We also took a very much an evaluation process. We are not dogmatic, meaning that that's the framework and it has to stay like that for the rest of their life. Very early on, from I think from week 3 or 4, we used our own, let me see if I have a template here. We used a version of this critical incident. Most of you might see it yesterday, but we can take another copy. we use that critical incident template. We modify it. Actually, we made it a template in the portfolio that it was around the thing at what moments or what times, but imagine this about portfolio. At what times in your portfolio journey did you feel most engaged? At what points in your portfolio evidence you were most confused? Who helped you most with your e-portfolio? Whom did you help with a portfolio? And we're collecting this kind of routinely, and we're getting feelings, okay, actually students are getting well. On the other thing is an application card template. We use it, it's another way that you can actually create a template for portfolios. If it is about application of anything, application of ideas, application of techniques. So you just came out from a lab demonstration, and to help you reflect, we ask you to identify skills that you've seen and how they can be applied in the work placement that you have decided. Or you are at the work placement, you learn a few things, how did you put them in practice? So this type of templates, if you get any provider, or if you use Google Forms, you should be able to construct them. So there's endless amounts. These ones, there's another one called the Minute Paper. I don't know if I have copies of it, but that's where we start doing it from that point of view. Which is fine. Now, I'm going to show you now the big scheme thing. That's the biggest attempt to put portfolio in the university, in the Bachelor of Arts, the BA. Yeah. So again, we are not there yet with this, but what we have done is we identified the big areas, which is about understanding social, political, and cultural context. So that will be our framework flavor. So all of the domains, including the scientific and the scholar, they will have to collect to these three pictures. And then influencing skills, creative, critical analysis, decision-making, innovative, curiosity, entrepreneurship, written. These things are going to be turned into our capability framework in the next couple of months. We've done this with students, academics, industry, and community. 4 workshops showcased, and they all agreed after a number of moving around that these are the skills we need to be landed. In the past, the Bachelor of Arts used to be just the major. Yeah, students, they will enter and they will do a BA in English, a BA in anthropology, a BA in history. Potentially, they will do a second major if they want it. From 2020, in 7 months' time, how many is it's happening now? The BA, for the first time since 1968, that was invented for our university, it will take a form. It's actually going to have a visual, people that will know what they're doing in the BA. That's a big step. So every single student in the university, in the BA, we're talking about a few thousand of them, they will be starting by doing critical thinking, which is the core skill. So philosophy will have a few thousand students teaching them critical thinking. Must. Everybody needs to do it. I will be coordinating together with colleagues the unit called Humanities and the World, and this is where we're going to show them the framework, and the whole unit will be about understanding the relevance of the humanities disciplines in the different capabilities and skills. Have people from industry coming and telling us what they value, a lot of debates. The idea is that the executive dean will open that thing, and she will tell you from the beginning, the very first task they have to tell us is write a personal statement, where they are, why they are doing it, where they're going to go. So all of this is going to be introduced to the e-portfolio, and it's going to be going as a vehicle for them to do it. Then they will be doing majors, minors, you know, they might be doing languages with philosophy, history with anthropology. They can have an option to go away for a semester long and do a study abroad thing for 4 fully sponsored by the university overseas, which is quite good. So that will be another opportunity we can discuss. We have around 100 partners across, but that will be for people that want to expand more their intercultural and this kind of stuff. And then they will come in year 3 and they will do a workplace experience, all of them. They're going to go away for a semester long and we place them in an employer or community, whatever, and they will be doing their placement portfolio that I show you, the workbook, and a capstone, and the capstone is going to be a simulation for a real job. So they will submit their portfolio to the capstone in order to get a job based on the skills, and then the job will be part of a scenario. So we're going to have around 6-7 different scenarios, interdisciplinary scenarios, where you need to have financial literacy, critical thinking, potentially a language, and depending on which capabilities you can tick, we will place you, and then you're going to do a big simulation, interprofessional simulation. Potentially people from 11 different departments being together in a big program. Big ideas. It will be refugee, solve the refugee issue of Australia. What a historian can tell me, what a person from health, what is your contribution? Give me the big buck. That's how we aim to do it. But that's why they will understand that if they don't pay attention to the portfolio from day one, more likely they're going to have big problems for both their workplace and the capstone. So that's happened. Extracurricular, it will be our own approved version of online courses and extra things that exist in the university that we recommend that they can do if they don't perform well in some of the areas in their majors. So if communication is their weak thing, keep doing more, because definitely communication will be one of the skills. And if everything goes okay, we want to graduate students with a BA and credentials. So every student at Macquarie will be getting, if they get the exemplar, also the transferable skill badge or things, without having to go through an additional process, which happens at the moment in the university. So this is kind of the big picture thinking. It's going to be looking a bit like that. You commence, humanities in the world, critical thinking, PACE is our work integrated learning, capstone, and then you're going to have a showcase portfolio to go out. That's where we are. It's going to be very, I mean, we're talking about a few thousands portfolios to be marked in the way that we discussed, and we are putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. From a point of view of the student, though, looks a bit like that. You have two modules, humanities and the world, critical thinking, 8 modules that they make up your major, your capstone, and your PACE. You have access to an e-portfolio tool that has the capabilities, literacy, digital, critical, with the milestones already prescribed. And your job is to keep bringing the evidence into the portfolio and collecting it as you go, with support and seminars. Now a tool, I show you Pebblebud, a tool that now we are trying to work with because allows additional features.
Introducing Portfolio, an e-portfolio solution unlike any other, and the only platform that seamlessly connects schools, students, and employers. Academic departments and institutions partner with Portfolio to provide free-for-life e-portfolios to over 3.5 million students and graduates at more than 2,000 institutions worldwide, helping to narrow the entry-level skills gap, improve the true value of a degree. Measuring and reporting on learning outcomes for our accreditation at the course, department, and institutional level has never been easier or more engaging than it is with Portfolio's in-class assessment platform, supporting multiple faculty, LMS integration, customizable rubrics, curriculum mapping, and reporting. Never before has this effort been tied directly to students successfully entering the workforce with proven career-ready skills on display for employers. With Portfolio, student projects, presentations, papers, labs, badges, clubs, and activities are curated in portable, free-for-life digital portfolios and tagged with skills and competencies that are reportable for assessment, leveraged by students in a job search, and matched to employment opportunities at the nation's top companies. With a cutting-edge, mobile-responsive interface, a built-in user support desk, and familiar social media components that students love. The platform syncs with your SIS and LMS, as well as other tools your students and faculty already use, resulting in even more valuable data collection and reporting. Partner universities have front-row seats to view and track all of their institution's valuable data and analytics in real time, from usage metrics to customizable dashboards, digital archives of student work and curriculum, and even skills and job placement outcomes. Students maintain free-for-life, unlimited access and capacity. Dedicated dedicated client support team without complicated or costly implementations taking months to launch. Portfolio. Request a demo today.
I'm just going a bit to... Yes. So this is the region we are going with we might go. It's at the moment negotiating the license and this kind of stuff. But what some of the tools like Pebble, but another they don't have yet, is customizable, user-friendly templates for you to be able quickly to download a report. I can download a report and see how many people they've done things. It's fine, that's the numerical. But to be able to have all the evidence displayed to me, and then I can click on the evidence directly from the high level without having to go into the portfolio, that's the only tool that does that aggregates the evidence from the portfolio from a view. So, and we believe that with 6,000 students, even if you're going to do some sampling, it's going to be better off to say, well, this student, is having only 1 star or 2 stars, so the tutors they keep giving, I would like to sample a couple of these assessments, but I cannot really go now from the dashboard to the portfolio, access the portfolio, go in. That will be like 10 minutes additional work per student. So any little trick that can save you 5 minutes per student in the grand scheme is huge. That's the main reason to go with them. And the other is they have 2,000 partners across the world, and you can get to see examples of portfolio from all 2,000. So the students, your students, they can see examples from Australia, from the US, from Europe, not copy them, but they can see them. And they have their own, they have also recruiter company. So they allow people to go and use the portfolios for jobs purposes. The thing that I'm not clear, and especially people from the health area, is they are, I imagine they have definitely a protocol about data and sensitivity and how do you store it. We asked that, especially for the medical professions, because we need to keep assessments for 50 years, 50. Yeah, at the moment we keep assessments for 50 years, just in case 30 years in your career you kill someone, and the investigation goes back to your training. Yeah, that's the law in Australia. So we need to keep a copy of all of them as a downloadable thing in our own servers. That's for medicine and health-related things, as well as for law. Yeah, 50 years, 50. I'm not joking. It was given to me as a thing. Can we make sure that we get everything and we have a same server running behind it? It's one of the expectations. That's how we go. So, if we were to summarize a bit the portfolio, the most important document that you will arrive is this. Yeah. Once you sort out this, the next step is the mapping to what is available across your units and across the university. And you will find out that there's a lot of gaps. And then it's an ongoing battle, if you want, to start taking away some of your assessments that they used to be only around scientists, and reworking the assessments to make them a bit more into the other domain. Like as we discussed, like a case study is great in year 1, but in year 2, you can go to the school and do a communication campaign. So that's where you will find yourselves and your colleagues, because you have to convince your colleagues. I cannot be the only one. I cannot have only one evidence of engaged citizenship across the degree. They will fail because I asked them for 8 evidence. Yeah. Can I see where? So it brings the teams together, collaborates together. But if this is too far now, and you're going to develop it only for your own thing, I will say that you develop pretty much a rubric on the basis of this, and you know that you have enough evidence in your own course to play a bit. But to have a successful framework, engage and go higher. That's the beauty of your portfolio. Otherwise, it's more of a different type of assessment and how that works.
Maybe just to add to your conclusion is that I think from our years of lecturing as well, I was amongst others also teaching PGCE students to go and be a teacher. So at the fine, it wasn't a portfolio as such, but I'm just thinking you can be so much more creative, but they had to, I wanted them to have something that empowers them when they walk into the profession. So I believe this could also be empowering. So if you must actually give the student something that he will find valuable that he can use when he goes into the profession. For example, there's a teacher's portfolio and a learner's portfolio for each subject you teach. And for my subject that I taught them, which was accounting, I said to them, so by the end of this year, you must have compiled a teacher portfolio, an example, and also a learner portfolio, because they go out for practical teaching. And while you are in that period, you must collect evidence to put in your portfolio. Yes, and that actually will give them a portfolio when they go in as a teacher, because they need a portfolio as a teacher. And then they need an example of how to build a learner's portfolio. So I believe this is very empowering for the student as well, to empower them, to give them confidence, and especially in health, to actually, I think it's critical.
I think the showcase is, thank you for that, because there is the development portfolio, which is the kind of the difficult aspect, the collecting and growing themselves and reflecting. And then is the showcase and celebration portfolio. So I would dare to say in the celebration portfolio, in the showcase, actually have a big event. We want to have a big event. We want the students to come here. We are talking with recruiters, can we run a recruitment day for them? So they will come and they will be able to have this 3-minute thesis type digitally or something, and people that can work. They need to feel that they get something out of it. It's important. We promise that at the day one. We tell them we spoke to the industry. There's a very good reason for doing. We cannot let them at the end saying, all right, now you graduate, here is your BA, off you go. It's a very big promise we make in order to work from that point of view, which is very important. It's a collection. There are creative ways. I mean, we are in conversation with Adobe. They have their creative cloud tools. The students, they can create videos of themselves. They show us examples of video CVs that they are in America. They are booming. They are more important than others. They don't show the face of the student, of the person for equity and things. But this imagine of it is almost like a student, tie whatever you prefer, sitting with their hands like that. They speak, and then their e-portfolio comes ahead. So, hi, my name is Panos. I'm an academic educator with 15 years of experience, coming from Greece. You can have your map. I'm an experienced educator. I've been running around the world, running workshops in TBL. Here's the photos from the ones that you took, and doing this and this and this. And by the way, I do have a certificate. That's my PhD. And it's when I witnessed, I said, yeah, that's I need. I don't want to read a CV. I just want this 3 minutes presentation. You can have a transcript, you can make it beautiful. So you can be very creative, but to do that, that's what I always say, that the difficult part is to get to the point that you can do that. And that is all this extra work that still needs, it's painful. Because the students, they don't see necessarily the value. Even if you tell them 20 times that communication is a good skill, they won't. So we've done interviews, we keep going. There will be students doing it for ticking the box, but at least you're moving into the right direction. Yeah, it's better than simply leave them to just do the exam and get out. Yeah, for that. Any other comments? Just one comment about the research. For research, there's a lot of good examples of portfolios. They normally are used, we're thinking to use it in the Master of Research at Macquarie, the MRes program. And the main reason is for students to be able to demonstrate in their research training how they engaged as researchers with the outside world and also with other departments for interprofessional research. So students, for example, they will come to our own research seminars, but they might not come to the health. But we figured out that, for example, theology and health, they have things in common. How do we go? So now the framework we are developing for the research is talking about interprofessional research, research in the applied research in the real world. So opportunities for students to go to a local meeting and get some ideas about a need in the society and come with an idea for research. No, attend your local council. and get some ideas. Attend the seminar from biology. Write down how this relates with what you do in philosophy before you grow. So it's more about growing your research and then providing the evidence of the milestones. If you are doing a PhD, for example, there will be milestones. You can put them clearly there, and that will be the record with the supervisor. And the supervisor can do all the forms and things online. So it's a very powerful tool in order to work from that point of view. Plus, most of the portfolios, they do connect with any kind of plagiarism detection softwares for, this is definitely the given. So you don't need to worry about students submitting drafts of essays or draft research proposals. They've all been filtered and they stay there. Any final comments? Just made it to 12:03. Or anything that is not clear from what we discussed? Or a comment, it doesn't need to be a question.
Just a comment, I think the extracurricula that you can build in. For example, let's talk about the research-driven, about academic writing. So you can actually build in those videos and online courses as prerequisites. And they must actually then do that first before they can attain the milestone. I think that.
I mean, we have study skills workshops. We have academic integrity workshops, the students. Now, if you put in the portfolio that your very first evidence of, as I said, behaving ethically is that you completed the university's ethics course. Do that, and then bring the evidence. You can make this almost a must complete and drives the behavior. Yeah, I agree. Anything else? We are covered. There's a lot of information, I know, but at least you got an overview of a model. It's one of the models that exist in that. And I just gave you 2 tools that I play with. There's lots of online tools in the portfolio, including freely available tools. But if you are to communicate to your managers, what we lose with the freely available tools is that. If it is important that you have control to somehow of what is happening so you can influence it, it's difficult to find that tool that it will aggregate. So we'll have to opt for a vendor. Okay, thank you, and thanks for the online colleagues. I don't take it as any question now. That will be a surprise. All right.
He can go on like this until the end of the day, I think. It's obvious he's very passionate about his portfolios, and I think you're doing an excellent job there. It would really be nice to see when you really implement this in the humanities, because if that can work, you can work at our faculty also with a very large and diverse faculty. So, Prof. Panos, this is just a small gift. It's small enough to put in your suitcase. Okay. Was it Malawi who gave you that one? He said a marmer, a plate that he had to take back. So.
Just smile and you say, sorry, but.
So thank you so much for the time and the energy.
Yes, thanks a lot,
We
guys.
appreciate that. And I would like to take a group photo before you leave. So the last one we had, we were sitting like this. Yes, this time I'll be in the photo. So can I ask, maybe we should just, those sitting there, just turn around so that your back or to this, and you can just turn to the side. Yeah, and then we will stand. Yeah, thank you. Oh yes, and the lunches are there when you leave.